Welcome to the Sports Science Dudes. I'm your host, Dr. Jose Antonio, with my co-host, Dr. Tony Ricci. If you're a first-time listener, excuse me, hit the subscribe button and like the show. You can find us on YouTube and Spotify, and eventually we'll be on Rumble, but you can definitely find us on YouTube and Spotify. Today, our special guest is Daria Albers. She is a professional Muay Thai and kickboxing fighter from Germany. She fought in the biggest organizations all over the world, including, and I hope I say this right, Wu Lin Feng, King of Kings, World Fighting League, and many more. She's also a smarty pants. She holds a degree in psychology from the University of Hagen, I believe. Hagen?
Yeah, Hagen. Yeah.
Hagen, and a degree in physical therapy from the Grone School of Physical Therapy. She's also a systemic coach, certified mindfulness teacher. She began coaching amateur and professional fighters in 2008 and has since trained some of the world's elite fighters. She's taught many workshops and seminars in Muay Thai striking all over the world. Daria works with some of the biggest names and teams in Holland, aka the Netherlands. I'm not sure which is more appropriate. The United States of America, Canada, Germany, Poland, and many more other countries as a striking coach. But for the past 4 years, she has dedicated much of her time and energies to mental performance coaching, which will be super cool. And she is the founder of the Mindful Athlete Program, or MAP. In addition to her work with mental performance for professional athletes, she also works as a mental performance coach for business professionals and individuals across many disciplines. But before we get to her, I need to make a plug for the ISSN conference in Fort Lauderdale Beach, June 15 to 17. Register at issn.net. That is issn.net. Hopefully, Daria could leave Poland and come to the USA, South Florida.
She has a place to stay and come join us.
She will love it there. So welcome to the show, Daria.
Thank you very much, guys. Thanks for having me.
Very special for me, I just must say, because this is one of my favorite humans on the planet. So we're very happy to have you here.
Excellent, excellent. Hey, before we get into sort of semi-serious questions, Tony and I like to talk about current events. And of course, we love talking about fights. You guys know more about fights than I do. I'm more of a fan, but you guys are in it. Tell me what you thought of the Pereira Adesanya fight. Now, I'll tell you what I thought, and people thought I was completely nuts. I actually thought Pereira had him hurt against the cage. And he got sloppy. He just started throwing. His chin was wide open, and he got caught. That's what I thought. But people are like, no, Adesanya wasn't hurt. I'm like, okay, well, maybe he wasn't hurt, but that's sort of what I thought. What do you guys think?
Go on.
I think actually first, because people say Pereira is sloppy, but that's just his striking style, right? His style, the way he strikes is open. That's just how it is by his biomechanics he's using, right? The movements he's using, it's just an open style. So I don't think he got really sloppy. I think what happened is that he was too narrow focused. When you get too narrow focused, that you don't see the periphery. You just don't see it coming, right? That's why sometimes in the fight it happens that you like, how the heck did you not see the high kick coming, right? How the heck did you not see the hook? Because sometimes we fall into this tunnel, right? Narrowing the vision field, right? And I think that's what happened to him. Like mentally and visually, he was narrowing because he thought he had him already, right? And I think he hurt him with the calf kicks, for sure. Yeah. I think he hurt him there. And then there was the knee coming in. Not sure if Adesanya was heard about this or not, but I mean, the knee is never great. And I think actually, because I was talking to someone about to Jared Gordon, who's also one of my fighters, right, which we all know. I love Jared. And we're talking about that he actually, Adesanya was waiting for it, I think 2 or 3 times before he really did it, right? The same when he guarded up really and shoot out this right hand. So I don't think Pereira was sloppy. It was just more an attentional issue, right? The focus issue. And Adesanya, I think they trained for it. So it was actually beautiful execution.
It really was. It was pretty to watch, actually. Yeah.
They wrote me an hour before the fight where I was like, wow, an hour before you go out, you're writing. And they wrote me everything good, perfect.
Good. I know you're close with him, he and the team. So I know you're a big fan, as well as being a good friend.
Tony,
Yeah.
what did you think of the ending?
Well, I guess, you know, when you listen to Daria, who knows, you know, she's she doesn't like talking about it, but she's a European champion, outstanding kickboxer, great coach. So I'm hard pressed to disagree with her perspective, right? Because it's not just a skill coach's perspective and someone who really knows the sport. She really knows the mental side of it. And if she thinks Alex was, you know, Pereira was seeing that narrow focus and maybe really thought that he had him, that probably is the case because she understands it so well. And yeah, I guess maybe almost just seeing red and going for a finish. And to Daria's point, even if you do see something peripherally, reaction time is so much slower on the outside periphery than it is centrally. So you might, if you really narrow that scope of vision, you can't respond. So I'm inclined to kind of agree with Daria on that.
So Daria, who do you think Adesanya should fight next? What would be the fun fight to watch?
Hey, I'm the hobbyist coach, right? Jan is
Other than him.
you know, who? I don't know really, because there's so much going on in the UFC right now. So many fighters going up and down, and weight classes changing around, and it's. I mean, I don't know. Adesanya, I just like him fighting. Every time he fights, I like seeing him fighting. If he wins or loses, it's just I just like the style. We have also very similar striking style. The striking style I teach is similar to his. And there was one thing he said to me when I was in New Zealand, because I was there for a few months with them. He came over after a few days like this, and he was like looking at me. You know, he sometimes like he observes you like this. So funny. This guy, I love this guy. And he came over and he's like, nice style. And I'm like, it's similar than yours, right? Not as good, but I'm not as slick as you. But and we had a good talk about this. And actually, he made me very emotional. One of the first times we met, he made me very emotional. I don't know if he still remembers, but he was observing me, and in his, we talked about striking, about the sport, about philosophy, and then it was so interesting. You know, guys, speaking about mental performance, he came over really close. And he said, did you believe in yourself when you were still an active fighter? And he hit me right into the heart, right? And I was like, wow, I got emotional. He can see things. He observes extremely well. So I think that's why whoever he fights is just it's always interesting, because this guy, the plasticity this guy shows, like in the mind, in the spirit, in the body, right? He got stronger also now. Very, very interesting.
Yeah, and I think if you're a lover of skill, you can't help but enjoy watching him fight.
Yeah.
Because you really, it's a great appreciation. So much of what he does looks so relaxed and so easy, but it's so challenging too. It's so hard to do, and he's really enjoyable to watch. I like him. I've become a big fan, largely through you and your appreciation for him too.
Yeah. It's really it's a very special human.
Yeah.
But there are a few of them in the UFC. There's a few. That's why I'm always very, very thankful for my job, because there's so many really cool humans there, and they inspire me to be better. And
that's why we're in this field, health sports science. You just meet the most incredible people all over the world. I mean, and for you, you know, I'm always curious when women have an interest in fighting. It's not really a natural choice. I mean, like for instance, my kids, when they were young, they played softball. That was their thing. And then they ended up running track. And every time I said, hey, maybe you should go to American Top Team and learn something, jujitsu, anything. They're like, no, don't want to do it. Don't really care about fighting. So what got you? I mean, it's not, you know, it's not common for women to be like, you know what, I think I want to kick other girls' asses, and because I just love doing it. How did you get started in it? Because you had quite a career.
Yeah, you know, oh my goodness, like over 20 years, much more than 20 years. I think over 25 years even in the sport now. I'm 39 now, so you know, yeah, actually more than 25 years, because otherwise it would be 30.
Time flies, Daria.
Exactly. You know what? I grew up in the village, and I was a wild child. I was I was really wild. My mom was always I was always outside, right? I like to be doing stuff by myself. We had horses and dogs and cats, and I was barefoot as much as I wanted, really wild, and I was constantly riding the horses like without anything, right? I was just jumping on them on the fields and just, oh my God, and climbing trees. And at this was I was just a free spirit. And then my mom tried to find some sports for me, and she put me into the soccer team, right? And it was just a boys soccer team, and I was the only girl. And so, and then, when they didn't I didn't like the rules or the referee, I pushed around a little bit. I was just very physical. I liked it, and I didn't like the rules of soccer. And then somehow, here and there, different things. And then she put me into judo, which I really loved then, right? Because I could roll around, and finally there was something I could touch and play and jump and do all that stuff I really liked already by the nature, how I grew up. And of course, I was still horse riding. And then one day I just walked into a kickboxing gym, and then that was it, right? I started kickboxing, and it's just, sometimes I talked with Tony about that. It was kickboxing, like, for example, hitting someone is totally not my nature. And it's until today, sometimes in sparring, I have to really put my focus on although I do it for such a long time, right? It's never my nature, right, to hit and kick someone's ass. And sometimes it was also to see in my fights, right? I was a great strategist, and that's why I'm a coach now. I think I'm a very good strategist. I have an excellent eye, and I understand the sport very, very well. But not always. I had this really forthcoming aggression, right? This killer instinct, this one to go for it. Every time when I heard them, I dominated him. I was like, yeah, all right, let's go a bit more easy, right? So I like to outpoint people, and I still like that. I still spar with my guys. I like to out technique them, but I'm not necessarily like a heavy puncher. And so the sport, because I was a very sensitive child, it helped me a lot, right? And the discipline and the mental toughness helped me to learn to regulate my emotions, because I was an interesting child for sure, like a loner child, not very sensitive, very early into philosophy, which helped me, right? The martial arts philosophy, I love it. I'm still, like, people who know me, I talk all the time about this, right? How much philosophy there is, how much life there is in this sport, right? It's just, for me, it everything I've done in my life is thanks to martial arts, right? My whole career, that I studied first physical therapy, because you think everything is physical. Then I went like, no, actually, there's a lot about the mental part. So let me go back to school. And I studied psychology, right? And then a few years later I was like, wow, there's so much spirituality in life, right? The heart, the meaning, the purpose, right? And I went back into contemplative practices, right? So my whole career unfolded because of martial arts, because of being in the sport. And I think that's why, for me, MMA, it started with kickboxing, and then later I went into MMA more and more. Really early, actually, a little bit too early for women. There was no women back then when I started. So I went back into kickboxing as a fighter. But yeah, it's just.
So what year would that have been when you started? What year?
Oh, you know what? The first time when I started training, like MMA, really, it was 18 years ago. 18. It was.
Okay, so you're talking about 2005.
Yeah, it was really, that's there were no women.
No, not yet. Definitely not.
Interesting.
And Dana wasn't even considering it at that point.
True.
And then when he started considering, he said would never happen, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it, in Germany they called it free fight. And there was not even called MMA yet. It was free fight, and it was a bit like a crazy sport back then, and there was no women on the mat really. So that's why I stayed in kickboxing also. And it's probably really 18 years ago, because it's quite a long time ago. I was really young. And then when kickboxing was the same thing. Like, we went to the Netherlands, and they were like, oh, you know what, how much do you weigh? I'm like, 70 kilos. And they're like, oh, she's wearing 82. She's 82. That's okay. That's just 12 kilos difference, right? That's like, That's
25 pounds.
Yeah, but that's how it was. You guys are similar, right? That's how they paired us up.
Oh my God.
And you went to the events, right? You went to the events and you were just looking if there's someone to fight. And it was like going to soccer game every weekend. And that's why, because I grew up in Germany, which is very close to the Netherlands, right? So every weekend we trained there. I trained with some of the best teams, with Andy Sauer, also many more. And that's how it went, right? We just went there and fought. That's it.
Why, sort of a sidebar, why does the Netherlands produce so many great kickboxers?
They had 3 gyms from everything started with. It was the Vos gym, Chakoriki gym, and Majiro gym. And that there started already by now, I think it must be 45 years, right? The coaches are most of them are still around. I know some of them also. And they went to Thailand and to Japan the first, right? And some of the earliest fighters, they got their ass kicked and they came back, and the Dutch people are very tough. They're like, okay, right? We got our ass kicked there. So they improved their technique and they started training with those guys, and they brought this whole culture and mixed it up with the more American kickboxing, let's say, right? They brought it together. They built the whole K1 scene.
Right.
They build it really. And it's just this nation is really part of the culture. In the Netherlands, you have kickboxing in school. It's a normal, like that you have that in sports, and they're very tough people. It's a small, and it's actually really interesting because in every little village there's a kickboxing gym. It's a little bit like in Thailand, I think. That you have it everywhere. It's just part of the culture, and they're good. They have a very good style also, which is, so let me say that style of kickboxing now is not so applicable for MMA, because the striking of MMA is super different now.
Right.
Kickboxing. That's why I moved. The last 10 years, I moved more towards striking for MMA. It's a little bit more strategical. It's a little bit more interesting, I would say, also. But still, in kickboxing, the Dutch guys are still some of the top. They're tough. I came there to spar. I was 16 or something, 17. I went there and they beat the shit out of me for whatever, 10, 12 rounds. And I went to the locker room and I cried, and they're both really big girls, right? I don't know why they're all so big in this country. I mean, I'm big already, right? But so they're giants. And they were like, just like this. They're like, you will get over it. And if not, you're just too weak, then find a different sport. And I was like, yeah, all right. Right, that's the attitude. And until today, it's still like this. Not always. It's a smart approach, let's say, as that, right? Because it can be a bit bad for the brain to spar a lot. We will see in a few years, won't we?
The journey, though, I guess, in the US, we put a lot of time into female sports, Daria, right? Like, for example, it's why our women's soccer team happens to be always competitive, right? Yeah. Our men are not. Our women track and field are very good. In the US, we've been ahead of the curve, I think, in female sports. The journey in kickboxing as a female in Europe wasn't easy, right? I mean, you certainly had a lot of perspectives on how you should fight, what you should weigh, how you should go about everything, and right? Yeah. Is that correct? Or
yeah, I mean, yes, I think I talk a lot about this also, right? My path was a super hard one until now. People say now, oh, you're one of the best in the world, and you know so many people, you travel the world, you teach seminars all over the world. I'm like, you don't understand how tough that road was, right? I came from city Hamburg, from Germany, right? That's where I started, and the guys were like, they were just not very open to have a woman. They didn't care, right? They were like always testing me that I'm physically not enough, I'm emotionally not, I'm mentally not tough enough, right? They constantly tested me. And so part of why I had later a little bit of mental struggles as a fighter was from the beginnings, right? Because for the first years, I was in a very toxic environment, a very aggressive environment to me as a female. And this is something when you start early and that's your first experience, it programs you. right? So I had a bit of issues with, like, I felt always, I felt like, oh, maybe I shouldn't do the sport, maybe towards the end, right? Especially when you lose a fight, you immediately start questioning that. And yeah, that it was tough. I had to always show I'm 10 times better than them, right? When I said in the past, when I said to those guys that I want to be a fighter, they laughed, right? Then I became a fighter and I started doing well, and they were like, okay. Then I said I want to be a professional fighter. They laughed. They're like, that's ridiculous. Do something else. They told me many times, find a husband, make some kids. Like, what the heck, right? What the heck do you want to hear? Then I went out to different countries, because it was good, actually, guys, because it made me get out of the country, right? I went to the Netherlands, I went to Canada, I went to the US, right? I looked for people who can teach me more, who have a similar mindset, and I support still people. I connect people all over the world all the time. The athletes I coach, right, they're all from, I don't know, 20 different countries, right? And they come together here in Poland or not different countries, we train together, because they always told me, you can't do this, you can't do that. And it made me, of course, it made me tougher, but in that moment, it was not easy. And especially then when I wanted to become a coach, look, at the beginning, people said, yeah, you can teach whatever you want to teach, but we're not paying you for this. So I said, like, no problem, I do it. There was even, there was so many, they said, oh, you can swipe the mats after, okay? I'm like, oh, all right, I swiped the mats after everyone. Doesn't matter. You have to, right? You just have to understand that people will not open the door, right? You have to kick them open with a strong high kick, front kick, and then that's it, right? And you step in and you just keep going, right? I do it, like I said, over 20 years now. So, but it was tough. And sometimes I'm now back in Poland. I was all over the place. I was everywhere, right, in the world. And I came back to Poland, and it's tough because people here are still quite narrow-minded, I would say, when it comes to, they don't have really a female coach on that level here.
Right. Well, that's why eventually we're bringing you to the good old USA, where we have still, it's wonderful to see how much trust has been put in you on every side of the aisle. As a mental performance coach, everyone, just so you know, some of the top fighters in the world right now are using Daria largely in mental performance, but also I know she occasionally contributes a little bit on the skill side too. And I think that should be an inspiration to a lot of young women who aspire to get into this, if they do it all. And I think one of the highlights, at least for me, was seeing you in the corner, in Jan's fight. And that just really, really made me happy, because that's a long journey for you to get there. And there aren't many women who have made it into the corner of a male UFC fighter. I'm not quite sure. I tried to research it. I'm not sure anyone has yet. So it's been a long journey, but a really great one to watch. And one to see people appreciate you and your skill set.
But it's in most promotions. When KSW, right? I have as a striking coach, or also as a mental performance coach, I have some of the top level fighters in our Polish promotion, or Ares. I go to so many different promotions, and they still like this. It's occasionally, of course, there's like the girlfriend is there because she's fighting too, and sometimes they're the coaches, but not the head coach, right? Not the main coach also. That's quite, it's still too little, I think, really. Now, lately, I was coaching with a girl together in one corner, and it was amazing. It was so smooth, so amazing. One guy, two girls in the corner. It was amazing. It was great. Good experience. We need more of this for sure.
Yeah, fantastic. I mean, I've had several coaches, judo and a boxing coach years ago, that were both female, and they were outstanding, and I learned a lot from them. So
I want to ask you a question on the mental performance side of things. I know that, with Tony and I in the field of exercise and sports science, for the longest time, we've more or less ignored everything above the neck because the brain's super complicated. And that's why, we're starting to look more at sports neuroscience, because obviously the brain, I mean, even the most basic sports like running, the brain, especially distance running, the brain can control whether or not you like choke when someone is next to you or passes you, or you're like, you know what, they pass me, I'll just pass them. I mean, for people who, compete in races, they know what it's like to get passed. It's almost like the world has ended, I'm going to quit. This person already passed me. So obviously there's a mental aspect. So when you're working with a fighter, obviously the fight sports are much more complicated than pretty much all sports, really, because you're getting hit. How do you, like, let's say I'm a fighter and I think I'm good, even though maybe I'm not good, but let's say I think I'm good. I'm an amateur fighter and I'm thinking, hey, I was told mental performance is part of it. How do you walk someone through that in terms of one, letting them know the importance of it? Because most people think I train. I do jujitsu, judo, boxing, grappling, whatever. I work on all those skills. Then I'll be a great fighter. But in fact, a lot of it is limited up here. So how would you walk someone through that who doesn't know any of the science of it and just wants you to help him become or her become a better fighter? And assuming they know nothing about it.
I explain quite a lot about the brain in very simple terms because we have to also, it's actually really good right now that I'm in Poland because my Polish is limited. So I have to keep it in very simple terms because I do not have other terms to do it. But I think I'm actually quite okay with explaining complex things in simple forms. It's just like, I think, part of being in our sport, right? Everything has to be just like, we don't have so much time. Right. And I explain everybody, and not just inside the sport. I even have to remind myself, right, that everything starts in the brain and in the mind. Yeah, every movement, every idea, every concept, right, starts in the mind. Every like I said, every movement, right? It has to be like the brain and the mind has to give an intention to do something. There wouldn't be nothing without the mind and the brain. And I think a lot of people are not even aware of this. When I ask them sometimes, okay, when you hit the target, right, you hit a jab, right? You want to hit the jab to the head. How does the movement start? And they say, oh yeah, I have an intention, right? And I just hit the left hand out into the head, right? Okay, where's this intention coming from? And then they're like, oh, yeah. Actually, you have to have an intention, right? That you're here in the ring and you want to do left, right? You want to execute your combinations, right? Your techniques. So you have to it all starts in the mind with an intention, right? Of the mind, the brain then, and the brain activates the nervous system and it goes. A lot of people don't think about that, right? Then next thing is that many people don't think also how much our reality perception, right, is all shaped by the mind, right, by the mental models we have in our mind. We have, I think in general, we have too little knowledge about the mind and the brain compared to the physical knowledge, right, to the knowledge about the body. A lot of people know about the body, at least a little bit, let's say, and there's not enough general knowledge about the brain. I think we're all doing the job right now because a lot of people, Huberman, right? I love Andrew Huberman. I mean, he's doing the biggest job right now, I think, to bring that out into the world. And it's so good that we're all teaching that. But just general knowledge about it. It's important to teach it, right? For example, okay, what is the mind? What is the brain? Then the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, right? A lot of people don't know anything about that. Right, the mind-body connection that, look, for the last 100 years, even in psychology, right, this is the mind or the brain, and this is the body. It's completely, nothing got taught connected. Right now we're getting together, we're like, okay, it's just actually one coin, two different sides, right? So I think that when I studied physical therapy, for example, I was lucky, I was in a very good school. They explained us a lot about the brain and the nervous system and the mind-body connection, because I was very interested in neurology. And now we're getting back to it, and that's super important, right? Someone who studies the body needs to study the mind and the brain. Someone who studies the mind and the brain needs to study also the body. Sometimes I think actually we need a whole different study field, right, about the mind-body connection. And this is something, the basic knowledge I teach my fighters a lot. We all need to bring more of this knowledge out there.
It can be a challenge, as noted. I think that what you that first step, I mean, to your point, I mean, the ancestor, to any action you do, it starts in the brain. There has to be a picture. There has to be an image. There has to be pre-planning, right? And your well, first there has to be a decision on what you're going to do. Yeah. That's your prefrontal cortex. Then you got to start planning. And there's, the premotor cortex, supplementary, motor. And what I say to my students often too, and this is not an analogy I like using, Daria, but it just shows you the influence over the brain. And that is, well, I should say the brain's influence over the body. If people have a cervical injury and unfortunately the spinal cord can no longer message, really nothing's going on. You can't barely breathe on your own. The heart barely breathes on its own. You can't, never mind the stretch shortening cycle anymore. You're not worried about muscle hypertrophy, reaction time. Absolutely nothing goes on. So the origin to everything we do is in the brain. And then, fortunately and unfortunately, every one of those actions is affected, as you said, by our perception of what our ability is, of what our ability isn't, what we're going to do at that time, and how we process that. That's one of the major things you taught me too. And, I'll let you go on with that, but also I think the biggest thing you taught me is emotional regulation, because trying to teach anyone anything is useless until they can regulate their emotions, right? Yeah,
it's two main things for athletes, right? Is control over attentional system and emotional regulation, right? When you get that right, when you really teach them the mental skills, how to control their attention and how to regulate their emotions, which comes then, with that comes then regulate the nervous system, the autonomic nervous system. If you teach them those three things, let's say, that's the main work I do. Right, I teach them, of course, like a lot of fighters come to me that they have maybe lower confidence or they have some negative limiting beliefs, but most, and I would say almost 99% of them have a problem with the attentional system, which most of all of us, right? It's a human problem, right? No control over the attentional system, right? Constant mind wandering, constant mental time traveling. With that comes all kinds of problems. I think it's the basis of most mental problems also, right? Constant mental time traveling, storytelling, the constant simulations we do in our mind. If that's the default mode network, right? If the default mode network is out of control, which is for most of us, right? We spend most times in simulation, storytelling, mental time traveling into past and future, right? That's the main problem of athletes, but that's the main problem of humanity right now, right? So the control over this, right? To bring someone to voluntarily use the attention system to narrow the focus, to widen the focus, internal, external focus, right? This is for an athlete extremely important, but then also situational awareness, right? Everything about attention, basically, right? That's why mindfulness and mindfulness-based cognitive therapy is, for me, like, it's the key to working with the most athletes. And then with that comes, of course, once you learn to actually, there's a saying, I don't know who said that actually, but it says when you steady the attention, you steady the mind. And that's exactly it, right? When you steady your attention, when your attention stays at, let's say, one target, as long as you wish it to stay, it refrains from mental time traveling, from simulation, from storytelling, right? That the mind will steady. And that is the problem, that it's not steady and they don't have that control. It's a problem of many athletes. With that, constant emotional regulation almost naturally, because why are we emotionally dysregulated, right? Because we do not have control where our attentional flashlight is going. This triggers me, that, right? In front of the fight. This guy looks stronger than me. Oh my God, my weight cut was strong. Oh, the coach. Oh, I wish I needed different pants, right? Oh my God, the 3 weeks ago, I ate the burger, right? I didn't run the 5K, I went 4.8, right? Because I was a little bit tired, right? The attention goes everywhere in the fight. And speaking about Pereira, right? I think that might have been why he got hit, right? His attentional system, right? He got so into this narrow focus that he just didn't see anything else. And
that narrow focus, in your view at that point, is what, Daria, just knock out and not being cognizant of anything else, or?
Yeah, mentally and then visually, right? So let's say
Right.
when mentally you get into the state of like because of course, sympathetic dominance, right?
Yep.
Narrowing of the visual field, right? You just like, you're too much in this, like, okay, this is it. I want to go. You go into this tunnel vision, right? But when you have tunnel vision, when you have a narrow focus, the visual focus, and mentally, this is the only concept you see, right? It's just hitting him now. That's it. I have him now. You don't see the periphery. You don't have even, you really literally don't have a different perspective, right?
Mhm.
It's just the only thing you know. So you don't see the counters, and you would not even calculate that there can come a counter, right? Things like that. And I teach my athletes a lot, like base of the work is really this. And then sometimes they're like, oh my God, coach, do we have to do it? Yes. But then, yeah, it helps, like I said, and then the next step, not just in the fight, it helps with emotional regulation so much, right? Because look, we all have a negativity bias. We are constantly in our mind. Most of the times it's some negative shit, sorry to say that, but it's just how it is, right? It's the constant stream of consciousness, right? The stream of thoughts, ongoing 24/7. And many of us are extremely negative biased. You cannot stop it. The only thing you can is learn to navigate it, right?
Mhm.
To redirect your attention. Yeah.
Yes.
And
Yeah. So I have a question. When you look at high skill sports, and Tony, I'll address this to you first. I'm not sure how familiar Daria is with, shooting a free throw or hitting a baseball or, or putting. I mean, the 20-foot putt looks easy, but guys miss. Let's take free throws, because when guys are trying to make that free throw, you have thousands of people screaming at you. And I was always under the impression that your mind you want to be empty, like an empty mind. I don't know how else to describe it. That all that stuff going on, all the screaming, all the people waving their hands in front of you, all you're thinking of is the motion of shooting that basketball. An empty mind. And I'm not sure how that ties into, what Daria was referring to, but explain that. Like if I'm a basketball player, I'm like, you know what? I seem to choke. 2 minutes left the game. Everyone's screaming at me. I need to make 2 free throws. I seem to miss one, but I'm great at free throws in practice. Walk me through that.
Like, for example, look, a lot of people say in meditation, right? I'm a meditation teacher also. They're like, oh, so I have to empty my mind. You cannot empty your mind. I don't know. Maybe some enlightened being can do it, right? I mean, no. I think
a lot of people are born empty-minded. I assure you.
It might be a little bit true. But like, it's not even about the empty mind, because it's almost impossible to empty the mind. But what you need to learn as an athlete is the interferences and the distractions, right? Because let's say the external world is it the voices or the coaches, or the internal world would be then your thoughts, right? About things that are irrelevant, right? How your parents would judge you, your friends, all the people, right? All the stress we have, right? So there are external and internal interferences, the distractions, right? And you cannot shut them out, right? You cannot just close them down. That's it, right? Again, you will have to learn to sustain your attention, to hold your attention, even when there are all the interferences, external and internal, right? That is something that is a pure mental skill, right? And that is a skill we need to train. We need to sit down. I always say, sit down on the cushion and train it, right? That is what mental skill training really means, right? We sit down, let's say, today with Jared, right? With Jared Gordon, I had the session today, and we're right now in the phase where we do a week of attentional training, and he sits in his meditation, or his exercise. He closes the eyes, and then we go, let's say, into narrow focus internally. He attends to his breath, right? Then we go to external focus, wide focus. So he opens his eyes, open awareness, right? Then he shuts his eyes again for the next 2 minutes. He tunes into his sense of hearing, just the hearing, like nothing else, right? Just the hearing, just the sounds. Then we change again. So So we keep changing between different focus types and styles, right? Internal, external, broad, and narrow. So that's a mental skill, right? And we need him then, let's say he teaches it in the exercise. Then I do that with them in the gym, right? We go to a really full gym and we sit in the middle of a cage, which people who don't know what we're doing think is absolutely ridiculous, right? What the heck are they doing? Right? Why is like when Jan, for example, Bohowicz, right? I mean, he's the mountain man, the Polish mountain man. When he was sitting with me like this in the cage, people were like, what the heck happened to him? He got this female coach, right? Can you imagine this? He sits him and he tells them like, okay, focus inward, outward, wide and narrow. They don't, right? They were like, what the heck is happening? So, but you do it then in the gym, right? Then you put it, once you had the skill, then you put it into training, right? And you start doing that on the pad work, right? To narrow focus, widen focus, what everything you need for the fight. And then you put it into sparring, right? So you build the skill, and it's a pure mental skill, right? And everybody can learn it. It's just like that. A lot of people think it's like this. I go to my mental performance coach. She does some magic. Some people think I'm a witch. That's how they say. You look a little bit, and you have to switch energy. I'm like, all right. I'm not sure if that's so good to be called like this, but they think it's magic, but it's not, right? How many years do we train our bodies, right? I think I train over 20 years in martial arts. I'm still improving, hopefully every day, right? Something to improve, something to correct, right? And then all with strength training, you do it your whole life and you stop it. Well, you maybe someone would say, hey, did you train like 20 years ago? You were not.
Right.
Maybe you can see some traces, right? But you have to keep training, right? You have to keep on doing your diet, right? Eating good and training your mind. It's an everyday thing, like brushing the teeth. And that's why a lot of people give up. They think about after a month or two, there must be some huge changes, and then that's it. No, you have to. It's a new habit.
So that's neat. So you're taking on a, pretty much on the cue or the ability, go narrow, focus, and then there's external again, there's distraction, come back in again, expand, see the outside, go back inside again, so that they have that ability to move in and out, almost automaticity when is needed to just stay in that very narrow focus, if you will.
Yeah, let's say when you go into the cage, you need all kinds of attention types, right? You need to focus on your target. You need to listen to your coach, right? You need to see. You need to feel where you are, right? You need to feel your body, where it is, right? You have to have the proper reception, right? There's the body awareness, embodiment, presence, yeah? That you have still to make quick decisions, but remember the game plan, right? You're working memory, right? You're training your working memory. And that is extremely crucial. Why do fighters, let's say it's a lot, of course, also about presence. So that's not the only thing what we do, of course, attentional training. But so when we lose a fight, if let's say our skills were there, our training was well, right? Why is it? If it's not a lucky punch, it's usually something mental, right? When two fighters with the same skill set come together and everything was on top. Let's say the weight cut was good, the game plan is good, both coaches are well. It's usually something about the brain and the mind, right? You didn't see something, your reaction time was off, right? You didn't believe. Right. And those are so you have to have like different focus. You have to have presence. There's a lot of mental skills that contribute to this 1%. Why the top level? Why you're the number one guy and number two?
Right.
Unless it's a lucky punch, right?
And you work in multisensory, the vision, the auditory, learning how to have auditory focus and what to cue in on, visual, proprioceptive. So it's multisensory too. It's not, okay, we're just looking and focusing here. Yeah. We're learning how to direct multiple senses toward that attention. Yeah, that's neat.
And then, of course, I work a lot on presence, right?
Yeah.
Coming back to mental time traveling, simulation, mind wandering, however you want to call it, right? If you step into the cage and you're concerned with anything that really skill execution and staying on the target, like that's it. You lose those milliseconds. That's why you get hit, right? Because You look, when you get, like, when you're not present, you are in a fight, you get hit, and you think you when you don't control your attentional system, you get hit, and what are we doing? Oh shit, oh I don't know, I will lose the fight. Yeah, that's when the follow-up shots hit you, and you're like, yeah, I really lost the fight. Self-fulfilling prophecy, right? That's exactly what happens with the guys, and you can see it, right? The eyes they're everywhere. They're looking at the corner, right? You can see they're losing control over their attention, right? And we're going into those simulations, right? Into, okay, what potentially could happen? Or they go back into, or we, because I was like this too. Everything I speak about actually happened to me. That's why I was interested in the science, right? So I got kicked or punched, and I was thinking, oh yeah, in the last fight that happened too. In the moment you go into this mental time traveling, you lost, right? You lost valuable seconds and moments in the fight to execute your strategy, your tactics.
Yes, you lost milliseconds in regathering your thoughts too, to the proper focus. Yeah, right.
Yeah, same like with the pain, right? I teach them that, right? You need to learn to distance yourself from the pain. That's why I teach them to be in neutral awareness to all kinds of body sensations, right? It's not just on the thought level, the emotional pain we have, it's also the physical pain, right? You need to learn to get a bit of a subject-object relation, right? To your thoughts, your body sensations, and your emotions, right? That's so crucial for a fight, for all of us. Everything I say here is actually for everybody, right? It's just, of course, a little bit easier to picture in a fight. But yeah, there's, I can go on and on, so I have a tendency sometimes.
I just want to make one quick note, then I'll let Dr. A ask. Sometimes the fighter doesn't lose the fight because of their attention or their skill, but because the judges lost them the fight. So you do not have to comment on this. This is strictly me commenting. I can think of an example, maybe in Jared's last fight where he didn't lose.
I know.
Dr. Antonio, why don't you ask your question?
No, that's kind of funny, actually. In some of these fights, I've noticed, and I'm not even sure what the mental aspect is, but a guy or girl get hit, and then they pretend that the hit wasn't very hard. They say, "Oh, come on, bring it on," and I'm thinking, is it me, or is that a sign that, you know what, you just got clocked and you're lucky you didn't get hit once again, because you'd be, your body be hitting the canvas. So I don't know if that's something you would coach someone to do. Is it supposed to psych your opponent out? Like, yeah, hit me again because you can't touch me? Or, I mean, I just find it amusing when guys, they play tough guys, like, yeah, sure, you hit me in the chin, but
they'll smile, right? And
right.
Of course, I mean, it's a little bit dependent on the character. There are people who are authentically like this, right? It's a very, very small percentage in the fighters, but there are just people who are absolutely in a positive crazy. They like it, they enjoy it, and they spar like this also, right? Okay. But look, I don't know if you ever seen when that happens. Did you ever see that how often the follow-up hits hit them? So a fighter gets hit, and then they laugh, right? They show this emotional reaction. And then they all get dropped by the follow-up, really, right?
Yeah.
Or they get really hurt. Why is that? Because this emotional reaction, because it was not an authentic one, right? It's a compensation mechanism, what they have keeps the attention away from the task.
Got it.
So you have something almost like an attentional blink, almost, right?
Right.
You're not focusing on the follow-up sequence. Right, that's what happens a lot. Like they get punched, they're like ha, and then boom, out. Right? Because
they do very often. The individual hits them, and they smile, and then they have to smile again because they just got hit with a 3-punch combo again. Right? But to your point, Daria, you're saying that the attention driven toward laughing or smiling is just diverting resources of the brain that should focus on what's coming next and how do we fix this?
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting. But then there's a handful of nutcases, you said, that it actually does get.
No, I mean, look, like you can psych yourself up. Sometimes the only thing we can do in life when we get hit, right? When we get like really hit hard in life, we can laugh, right?
Right.
So that's just how it is, right? It's just how we can deal with something, right? So I'm not saying this is always like that and it's always bad. Sometimes it's like before you start crying, start laughing, right? How many times do we have that? And so you also can sometimes psych yourself up with this, right? To be like, okay, I love this. I just love it. Sometimes you have to
Yes.
tell you that because it hurts, right? And we all know that, right? The self-talk, it's part of the self-talk, right? When the smile comes with something with a strong self-talk, it, of course, it impacts your physiology, right? Your mental, emotional, physiological state. So like I said, there's always, of course, yeah, we're all a bit different, but yeah.
That's funny. I mean, one of the fighters I've always enjoyed watching who's very good at taunting their opponent is Nate Diaz. I mean, he's like the ultimate taunter. And I think when and I don't know why I laugh at it, but when he slaps someone, I find that funny. I'm like, oh my God, he just slapped him. It's almost an insult. Like, I'm not even going to punch you. I'm going to slap you. And so that has to psych his opponent out, because it's like, oh my God, he has no respect for me. He's slapping me.
Yeah,
you
of
know?
course. It's that's why fighting again is so interesting, right? It's those minor things that shift completely the energy. In a good fight, in a high professional fight, it's just one little change in energy, right? One little thing when you're like on your back foot, a little bit more into defense, that's already right. You go into defensive mode. There's so many little small shifts, right? Or you can lead the fight and you get hit once, and it's not that it drops you, but you feel it. And immediately you have that moment of tension, of hesitation, right? Changes completely the energy around. And it can go so quick in a fight. But I think what is so interesting, that's why I love fighting in martial arts so much. It just, the same thing happens in life. We just don't see it like this in life, right? In the fight, everybody's watching, right? We all know what it is about. You're almost like naked, emotional, mentally, physically also partly, right? It's like you cannot hide anything in life. It's just that we can all be a little bit more sneaky
Right.
sneaking around, right? Running away, like to try not to, like, okay, I don't like this person, so I avoid, right? We can avoid difficult situations. In a fight, it's not like that. But those tiny shifts in energy, they happen. Look, during the day, how many shifts of energy of let's say moods we get during the day. We're like this basically, right? Constantly. Hopefully it goes like this.
Right. At least hopefully they're working their way up linearly a little bit.
Yeah, until the end. But yeah, it's super fascinating what you can do, little movements. A lot of people, they ask me, for example, about the face to face, right? Which a very good example was like the face-to-face of Jan and Rakic, right? When he fought Rakic in the last fight. So Jan, usually, when he doesn't have his glasses, he doesn't see super well, right? And so he always like looks down and then he comes up before to the face-to-face. And Rakic was standing there and Jan does this. And when he came up, it was really dark there. He turned like this to Rakic's face, yeah. and Jan was like, it's just, now look at the interpretation and the energy via it's actually snowy moving around here. Snow is changing.
Cute puppy.
And so the interpretation and the shifts of energy. So Jan he was like, when he was like this, nose to nose, lips to lips with Rakic, he was like, oh well, I'm already here. I'm not stepping back. Why? That would look stupid. And Rakic, it made him really emotional because he talked in numerous interviews after the fight about this. And look what he said. His mental performance coach, she probably told him to come aggressive to the weigh-in, right, to the face-off, and it threw him off without me wanting him.
Right.
Planet, right? And because he talked it, I just realized that it triggered him because he talked in numerous interviews about that, right? That I told Jan.
I remember that, yeah.
Yeah, really. He was really, really triggered by that. But look how it is. One situation to completely different intentions or interpretations than of this, and a completely energy shift, right? Because if you go, Jan was like, oh, well, okay, I'm just staying here. I'm a mountain, so I just stay here. stayed like this. And the other one, he got angry, right? He got frustrated.
That
It
is
is-
hilarious.
And it's
Yeah.
fascinating when, like you said, that small little, just, I know we'll be cognizant of time here, but then the credit, then what's going on. So just quickly, a great example of the resiliency in a fight before that, when you saw Kelvin fighting Curtis Blades, wonderful exchanges back and forth, right? And you have the dynamic of that fight almost not changing on the dime. They're both getting hit really hard, but then they're coming back and forth. And that just shows, I guess, incredible resiliency and ability just to stay focused and yet shake off what just happened. Okay, he got me, no big deal. Let's come back. It makes for wonderful fighting. But to your point, there's a lot going on in the brains of both of those guys in milliseconds to be getting hit that hard and yet just shaking it off and then coming back with a beautiful combination, right? That's there's a lot of experience too amongst both of those guys, but fun to watch.
Yeah, of course. It's this unshakable spirit or unbreakable soul. How I say that, at least with Jan, we have our little things we say, and one of the things, unshakable spirit or unshakable soul, and it is in different terms, it's the neutral awareness, the non-judgmental neutral awareness to what is. It's non-reactivity, right? A fighter, or we in life, we have to learn to be non-reactive to what is, right? You can't, and it's not action reaction, because sometimes people understand it. What do you mean with non-reactive in a fight, right? I mean emotionally or mentally non-reactive to the triggers, right? You have to be in this neutral awareness. That's when you execute the game plan, right? That's when you execute the strategy, and that's when you're at the skill execution, right? And that is how you really win the fight, unless you get a lucky punch. But yeah.
Daria, we got to be respectful of your time. Excuse me. Could you tell the audience where they could get more information about you?
It's dariaalbers.com. It is the Mindful Athlete program. That's everything about my program. People can contact me. And then, of course, my Instagram, Daria Albers. There's just one for now. There's just one. Facebook also, of course.
And when will you be in Florida?
I hope soon. I love it.
We got a place for you to stay, and you'll come to ISSN. I know you're a busy woman. The world, everyone, is relying on her for both skill, but largely mental performance. So it's tough for her to get here. But please go to dariaalbers.com and research the MAP Mindful Athlete program, which we love because MAP gives you a course, a direction, shows you where to go and how to get there. And that's what Daria is doing for the best in the world. So maybe we can try to get you out here in June if you don't have another title fight.
Yeah, I think actually in June or July we will have one.
All right. Oh, you have a title fight?
No, not but fight. So we'll see.
Well, Daria, thank you so much. It's been a fascinating conversation. Always appreciate new knowledge coming from you, and hopefully we will see you in the Sunshine State soon. So thank you very much. Thanks, Tony.
You got it. See you, Joey. Nice job, Dee.
Thank you.